This story will be a quickie. There is not much to this event, and worse yet, there is not much known on the history. As with my other stories, I will begin with a quick introduction. I grew up in a small town south of Windsor, Ontario. The lands around me were mostly farm fields and marsh. Town was a simple few-minute drive after you turn left at the end of my street. If you turn right, you head out further into the sticks and are subjected to the back roads. These roads pass through the marshes and consisted of several land bridges, with a few of them low square-form cement style. Regardless, there were a lot of deep ditches, washouts, floodlands, swamps, and brushes before you started back into solid farmlands. As a young adult, I was into a lot of the ghost activities of the area, and for a time, did a lot of research. Many of the events in my life were self-inflicted in one way or another. This one was not. It occurred by sheer happenstance. Before I get into details, you will need to know a little bit of the troubles young adults have of buying alcohol in Canada, as it's not readily available. Alcohol in Canada is sold from two different stores only. You have the beer stores that sell anything to do with beer. Then you have the LCBO that sells all the hard stuff, wine and imported or exotic coolers and beers. The beer store always seemed closed when a party was on. I think it closes at 6 p.m. Insane time considering we are Canadian. Beer is practically our national mascot. The LCBO stays open until 9 p.m., and one location in Windsor stayed open until 12 p.m. So imported crappy who made this crap beer was always our closers on a late night party. The first occurrence was after a crazy night of partying. We had a barn party, and we had been all over the county looking for beer and or alcohol, as it was not readily available at that time of night. So we made a trip into the city to a known hillbilly farm that brewed white lighting. So there we were, barreling down the dark foggy road in the twilight hours. We were 18 and wild on an autumn night. It was probably about 3 a.m. in the morning, and I was with a buddy of mine and our girlfriends in my car. We were returning to the barn to finish the night out with our girlfriends in the hay. We had scored some moonshine and a few imported beers that would make the night go off smoothly. This night was a calm night. It was dark and foggy. I had a 1974 black-on-black Dodge Dart muscle car with a V8 that growled down the highway. I loved the car and drove it everywhere. The headlights were incandescent bulbs. If you're old enough, you'll remember them. They were a yellowish light and not very bright. They did give off a very ominous, luminous glow. Of course, the party barn was on the far side of the swamps, and in the fog, one was always cautious of animals running out in front of you. So I was paying attention to the outer spectrum of my headlight range, looking for motion and shadows. What we were talking about at the time I cannot remember, but I am sure it was something stupid. We were passing up a swamp area with water on both sides when I saw a faint light. At first I thought it was a reflection from a no trespassing or hunting sign, but the light was moving towards the roadside ahead in a slow but steady manner. Then I realized I could make out a person. I immediately thought it was a person standing up on a small boat, but I could not see the boat and the person was actually moving kinda quick. As my car continued and started to pass over the land bridge, the person came into view. I slowed, as to be cautious that I might hit them if they crossed in front of me, but it was not making much sense in my head, as there was water where they were, and surely they could not reach the land without stopping. So I continued to drive and told the other passengers to look. As I approached what seemed to be our intersecting path, a lady became clear. She was dressed in an old long jacket with a doily-style large collar fringe, and I think a white bonnet hat that looked like a muffin top, 1800s-style clothing, I think. She was carrying a lantern, something like a stagecoach lamp. She was perfectly visible, yet always somewhat foggy. She had an implied detail about her that left specific impressions of what she looked like, without actually being able to focus on her. She glided across the road from one water side to the other in front of my car. She passed very close, probably 15 to 20 feet. She moved rather quickly, and I distinctly remember that she did not have any feet, but her legs moved as if she was walking under her coat. She was lifted above the road, what looked to be a foot higher than she should have been. We all saw her as she moved back out over the water on the other side and faded into the fog. We were all stunned for a moment. I pulled the car off to the side of the road, about a mile up the road. The car was silent with awe. I could not believe what I saw. I asked everyone else, and they said they had seen her too. They all agreed that she looked as if she was looking for something. Regardless, this was an amazing experience, and we were now completely filled with energy and amazement. When we got back to the party, we met up with some other friends and told them what happened. One of the older farm kids, that was a friend of a friend or something, said it was the Lady of Knapp's Island. I had never heard of her, and I lived only a few minutes from Knapp's Island. I asked him who she was or why she was haunting the area. He did not know anything other than she shows up on random foggy nights, crosses the road, and then disappears. So, of course, this got my attention, and for the next little while I asked around about the ghosts, it seems that many of the older generation folks, 40s to 50s at the time, all knew of her, but no one knew anything about her. She was called the Lady of Knapp's Island because she had been seen at the water crossing just a quarter-mile north of the island. I never been to the island, nor had I ever really looked for it. So a few days later, we took a drive out to see the island. It's not really much of an island. You depart from the main road down a gravel road, following the edge of the swamp. There were only one or two old houses on the road back then, and you travel to the end of the road. The road is only about a mile long and has a large bend in the road before you arrive at a farm that ends the road. At the bend is a small rotted plank bridge that spans about 50 feet out into the swamp, where it lands on a small island of land covered in swamp trees. The island is only about 50 to 60 feet wide and maybe 200 feet long. It narrows significantly at the north end. The whole area looks to be a floodland that remains wet for most of the year. On the island is a rundown, very rotted and old little cabin. It looks as if it was a hunting cabin at one time, but has long since been abandoned and partially overgrown. We never crossed the bridge to get a closer look at the cabin, as the wood was too rotted. One telling of the ghost said she had been seen in and around the cabin on foggy nights. I thought about checking it out on the next foggy night, but even I was not that crazy. I never discovered any further information about her, but I did see her again years later. I was coming home very late at night, 1 a.m.-ish, and I saw her. This time I was traveling in the opposite direction as I was many years before. I saw her further out, and she crossed the road about 200 feet in front of my car. I was amazed and reflected my past experience for the rest of the ride home. About 2 years after that, my wife, who worked midnights at the time, came home all in a fluster and woke me up to tell me that she had seen a woman crossing the road with a lamp. I asked her where she saw her. She told me in the swamps. I continued to describe to my wife how she looked and how she moved, and how she disappeared on the other side. She was amazed that I knew. I told her that she had just seen the Lady of Knapp's Island. My wife was beside herself at the time as she had never seen a ghost, and I never told her any of my stories. Since then, I have never heard anything about the lady. Maybe someday someone will figure her out.